Welcome to Season 6, Episode 4 of Exopolitics Radio. Welcome back. This is Exopolitics Radio, a weekly magazine format public affairs program on exopolitics, the new political science of outer space, the science of relations between our human civilization and other intelligent civilizations in the universe. Exopoliticsradio.org is listener sponsor, and we welcome your monthly or sustaining contributions to our overhead at the donate button at www.exopoliticsradio.org. Our audio archives are free and open as a service to the public 24/7 at www.exopoliticsradio.org. Exopolitics Radio is broadcast weekly on our affiliates, which include exopoliticsradio.org, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, with over 3.8 million listeners per week in 104 countries and 309 U.S. cities, Revere Radio Network, and Kansas City Online Radio Network. Listen to Exopolitics Radio on iTunes and RSS feeds throughout cyberspace. I'm your host, Alfred Lambermont Weber, and this week we start a series on a new topic, not only a new topic, but a new avenue or open vista in exopolitics. And that's the area of exopolitics and alien abductions, which has been, some might say, purposely kept apart. Our view here at Exopolitics Radio is that the two priority areas of investigation in the exopolitical field, and as a matter of our utmost societal needs, are number one, the formal acknowledgement of the existence of an intelligent civilization on the planet Mars and of life on Mars, of humanoids and animal forms and cities and structures on the surface of Mars, as evidenced in the NASA rover Spirit photographs. And we've had a number of programs here on Exopolitics Radio, which include an award for the top UFO story of 2008 for Exopolitics Radio series on the discovery of life on Mars with Andrew D. Bashago. And you can review those episodes for free online at our archives 24/7, which we maintain as a public service and a kind of a university of the internet at www.exopolitics.org. The second priority area we're starting tonight, and we're starting it with a two-part feature interview with Joseph Montaldo, the International Director of the International Community of Abduction Research, ICAR. Joe Montaldo is here, and he told me after the program, giving Exopolitics Radio, in a sense, an exclusive look into the explosive research that they have uncovered using the scientific method, and that is using direct interviews by groups of between 20 up to 40 and 50 extraterrestrial abductees, alien abductees, interviewing the aliens themselves as to what the alien agenda was. And just a bit of a kind of a journey back into my own research into the area. Like many other people back in the late 90s, I read Professor David Jacobs' book, professor at the University of Pennsylvania, The Threat, which set out some of the preliminary research and models as to this very puzzling and disturbing aspect of the extraterrestrial presence. And I was told, quite frankly, by one of the then leading lights in extraterrestrial research, oh no, don't look at that. None of the extraterrestrials are carrying out any programs that are inimical to the human civilization. And over the years, as we first brought out Exopolitics in the year 2000 and then developed as more and more people began getting on the bandwagon and kind of burgeoning out the field to where Exopolitics was a nominee for Word of the Year in the year 2000, and now there are international conferences on exopolitics, and exopolitics being taught in their academic journals in exopolitics. I encountered a great deal of organized resistance within the exopolitical field by some of the leading luminaries in exopolitics and some of their followers who would attack any mention of alien abduction and any mention that the abduction agenda was in any way inimical to the goals of an evolutionary human race. Well, with Joseph Montaldo's interviews, two-part interviews, and with the research that's mentioned there, that you can easily access and verify for yourself, the separation between exopolitics and alien abduction research comes officially to an end. Exopolitics is the science of relations between our human civilization and other intelligent civilizations in the multiverse. And no matter in what parallel universe they find themselves and under what circumstances, another intelligent race which may have inimical goals or dualistic goals or problematical goals toward the human race needs to be not only the proper subject for exopolitics, but needs to be brought to the attention of the mainstream public, the mainstream governments, the mainstream scientific establishment, and no matter how much it shatters their paradigm, so that this information can come through. The way I got to this information was very curious, because when I returned from the X conference in Washington, D.C. in April of 2009, one of the 5 review books that awaited me was a book from the publisher, Red Pill Press, of Laura Knight Jadzik's new book, High Strangeness, which is on hyperdimensions and the alien abduction phenomenon. And I read that book, went into a week-long process, underlined paragraphs, sentences, words, really thought about it. And what Ms. Jadzik presents, which I reported in an article on my Examiner.com column that received national and international controversy, but I was just reporting what was reported in the book, and that is the existence of a multidimensional, in some way you can call it parallel universe between ourselves, the human race, and we exist in a dimensional ecology, which is one of the posits of exopolitics. And in those dimensions, there exists in an adjacent dimension to our own, with other properties in relation to time than the time-space dimension in which we exist, a predatory race, not of the mammalian phenotype, but of the reptilian, and that reptilian race had in fact been destabilizing our race and is attempting to usurp it in our parallel universe. This is stuff of science fiction, but it is the stuff now of science fact based on the empirical research of Joe Montaldo and his dedicated group of research at ICAR, the International Community for Abduction Research. That journey, thanks to Laura Jadzik, and as you will see in the interview, we interviewed Joe Montaldo very coincidentally and synchronistically, perhaps, on the same day that he had just finished interviewing Laura Knight Jazik, author of High Strangeness, on these various models of abduction research. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you for those who have been exclusively in the exopolitics area and perhaps only in UFO research, for those of you who are joining us for the first time in public affairs, a new world in which, yes, the research confirms it, that as many as 1 billion humans of the approximately 6 billion alive today, or a little under 20% of the Earth, has been abducted by a civilization of reptilians and of gray extraterrestrials. And once you get to the number of 1 billion, I mean, the accepted research under the 2002 Roper poll had been that approximately 2% of the nation's and of the world's population had been abducted by aliens, ultradimensional or hyperdimensional or extraterrestrial beings. Now we found out that the actual number, which is like the proverbial elephant in the room, is 1 billion. Well, from a public policy standpoint and from a safety standpoint, the knowledge that an alien interdimensional civilization is abducting up to 1 billion persons in the human race and returning them with erased trace memories, so they have no memory of it, but which can be reached through hypnotic regression and other techniques, is severe news. As the former late Secretary General of the United Nations, U Thant, stated, the extraterrestrial threat is the greatest threat that we face. Now, to be very clear, see, just as we live in a complex world, we live in a complex dimensional ecology. And there are upper dimensional ethical extraterrestrials that are engaging Earth at this time, that have been the normal study of exopolitics, and that are encouraging or supporting our human evolution. What we're referring to here is hyperdimensional species in a parallel universe or parallel dimension who do not have such positive intentions toward the human race, and as we shall learn, who may be coming to a culmination point in a very drastic agenda with potentially severe consequences for the human race. And our job at Exopolitics Radio is to get this word out to a wider public, and beginning through the bridges that we're doing in Exopolitics at exopolitics.com, now bridging out to the office of the President of the UN General Assembly, bridging out to major national governments, bridging out to different populations through education, beginning and trying to get the mainstream mind of humanity, which has been severely crippled since the 1953 Robertson panel, which decreed that there was to be no discussion of the extraterrestrial presence in civil society, and mandated that any such discussion in academic or governmental or educational or professional circles would be met with severe consequences, i.e. end of career, if not end of life. So with that kind of framework, we'd like now to bring you exclusive breaking news in the exopolitical world on Exopolitics Radio, the first of two feature interviews with Joseph Montaldo, director of ICAR, the International Community of Abduction Research. This is Exopolitics Radio. I'm your host, Alfred Weber. Please stay tuned. Thank you. This is a reading from Exopolitics, Politics, Government, and Law in the Universe, a book by Alfred Lambermont Weber. Chapter 1, Introduction to Exopolitics, the Exopolitics Model. Is there intelligent life elsewhere in the universe? Exopolitics as a discipline for understanding universe society through its politics and government may turn our dominant view of the universe upside down. Exopolitics posits that the truest conception of our earthly circumstance may be that we are on an isolated planet in the midst of a populated, evolving, highly organized, interplanetary, intergalactic, multidimensional universe society. End of quote. You can support the cause of exopolitics and the development of your own mind and being, an expansion into this new vision of an upper dimensional society on Earth by reading the book Exopolitics, which you can purchase at www.exopolitics.com, at amazon.com, or at any local bookstore by ordering it through Baker & Taylor, their wholesale distributor. We at Exopolitics Radio are happy to announce that we have reached a settlement with one of the major infringers who had published Exopolitics, the book, online in a pirated edition. This had deprived Exopolitics Radio from almost $30,000 in funds that we could have used for public events and for other areas of promoting and fighting for extraterrestrial disclosure. Now that these pirated editions have been taken off of the internet, we urge you to consider buying Exopolitics, the book, and getting into it as a primal source for the 21st century. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Welcome back. This is Exopolitics Radio. I'm your host, Alfred Weber, and today we have a very special guest. We're starting a new avenue of inquiry, and that's exopolitics and alien abductions. And we have Mr. Joseph Montaldo, who is co-founder, international director, and spokesperson for ICAR, the International Community for Alien Research. That's at www.ICAR and then the numeral 1, icar1.com. Originally affiliated with MUFON as an investigator, Mr. Montaldo became disenchanted with the lack of information being shared with the general public. His first step in furthering public awareness was establishing a personal website at www.alienenigma.com in 1998, and later the ICAR site, www.icar1, ICAR, and then numeral 1.com, was added to the Internet. ICAR started as a grassroots organization and is now established with members in 11 countries. While UFO sightings are always investigated, ICAR's main focus is on alien abductions and the alien agenda,
as something we really want to focus on in exopolitics. ICAR members and Joe have investigated over 5,000 cases of alien contact and abductions in 2005, and again just now in 2009. Joe Montaldo spoke at the X conference, and members of ICAR provided press coverage in Washington, D.C. at the S conference, as well as at the last two crash retrieval conferences and the 2006 Law-Free conference. Joe Montaldo is now on the board of the Exopolitics Institute, where he advises on alien abduction and media areas. Welcome, Joe.
Oh, thank you, Alfred. It's always great to talk to you, and it's great to be on your show.
Oh, well, thank you.
I've been looking forward to you. You do really well on the network, so I've been looking forward to come and hang out with you and talk with you.
Good. Yeah, and I should mention that Exopolitics Radio is heard on. Could you give some of the information?
We started carrying you on Saturday nights now as well.
Oh, good enough.
So we're carrying you 10 to 12 on Saturday nights in the Paranormal Radio Network and on 105.3 FM out of New Orleans. And not to confuse people, it's UPRN 105.3 out of New Orleans. It's the Paranormal Radio Network on the Internet, which are both the same network. It's just they got two different names because one's terrestrial-based and one is Internet-based. And as of now, according to the last surveys, we're at 3.8 million weekly listeners worldwide.
Wow.
144 countries, 309 American cities. So, guys, look, we can be heard. Look, you can even hear us on your cell phone.
Wow, that is amazing. Well, you know what we'd like to do today is to begin to make a foray into the area of alien abductions and exopolitics. Exopolitics being, as self-styled, the new political science of outer space or of interdimensional space, and the science of relations between our human civilization and other intelligent civilizations in our multiverse. It doesn't mean that other intelligent civilizations have to be positively disposed toward us. There may be a spectrum, but I think one of the principal concerns, Joe, is that up until now, exopolitics as a discipline has shunned the alien abduction area. And there's also been some expressed hostility from some of the leading alien abduction researchers toward exopolitics. And so we at Exopolitics Radio would kind of like to bridge that gap and show that, no, that exopolitics is a discipline that can begin to encompass. So my first question is, are alien abductions still occurring, and what is their number?
Well, they are still occurring. Right now, our organization is at 12,500 investigated cases. Now, that's out of a caseload of probably more than 50,000 cases over 25 years. It sounds like a lot, ladies and gentlemen, but it really isn't, because ICAR has more than 15,000 members. So we actually have a large research base at our hands and a lot of people working for us. But best we can tell, and this is a conservative estimate, we figure 1 in 100 people have been abducted or are contactee. Now, the way we come up with these numbers is there's a group that got together, a group of abduction researchers, and what we've done is we figure like this. For every one person that comes forward, there are probably 1,000 that will never come forward, ever. And you have to remember something about contactees or abductees. A lot of them don't even know and never will know. It's a very rare thing. I know it doesn't sound like that way when you hear contactees speaking on the air, because you hear a lot of them speaking, but it's a very rare thing for a contactee to have memory. And to have some of them like Katarina Wilson and some of the other ones that have a large recall, that's a very, very rare thing. So we have to take advantage of people like this when we get them, because we need to gather all the information we can from each and one of these individuals. So we know now, judging from when I got in ufology 25 years ago, based to where I am today, when you do the math and you actually crunch the hard numbers on the caseload we have and how many cases come forward each week, We're figuring probably somewhere around 15 to 18% of the known population has probably been abducted.
Now, could I jump in? Because we have a couple of data points. One is the 2002 Roper poll, which stated that 2% of the general population would have been abducted, and now you said 1 in 100.
Well, I'm really thinking, Alfred, probably about 18%, and I'll let you finish, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah. So you're saying that 18% of the general population?
18% of the general population.
Wow. Now, I believe, let's take just for argument's sake that the U.S. is at 300 million people. They're at 300 million plus, but taking 18% of 300 million, let's say 20 million, that's
a lot of people.
20%, that's 60 million people. 60 million people. So you believe that somewhere around 60 million Americans have been abducted?
Well, we agree with most major researchers about 1 billion worldwide.
And 1 billion worldwide.
And I'll tell you why. Because we found out something that a lot of researchers forget. The problem for a lot of researchers is they think this phenomena started with Roswell, with the crash at Roswell. Well, we know this phenomena started much, much, much earlier in history. Now, if we only argue back as far as the Sumerians and say only 1 in 500 or 1 in even 5,000 people were abducted 6,000 years ago, okay?
Okay.
ET abducts in family lines. So that individual had children, and they had children, and they had grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It just in one family, you're looking at probably over 6,000 years, 100 to 200,000 people from that one family. Now, we know there was numerous of families. The Egyptians and the Sumerians talk about almost full-blown contact, where everybody knew what was going on. The Sumerians talk about it in great detail, and the Egyptians talk about it quite a lot themselves. So there was a lot more open contact back 6,000 years ago. So if you take from what we know was going on 6,000 years ago and you extrapolate forward, you're at least a billion of the people alive today are descendants of the original contactees 6,000 to 10,000 years ago.
Oh, okay, now, let me just get this straight. So you're saying, are you saying that a billion people cumulative since the Sumerian times, or are you saying a billion of the people alive today have been abducted?
A billion people today are descendants of abduction. Doesn't mean they've all been abducted, but they mean they come in the family line, and if they haven't been, they will be.
Yeah. Okay. Now, just to get a more manageable number of the people alive today, what percentage or how many people do you believe, percentage-wise, either worldwide or in the U.S., have been abducted?
Worldwide, if I have to put a number on it, and I do it by the research, I would say it was close to 1 billion people. I would say it was
wow. So that's about 1/6 of the world's. That's about 20% of the world's population.
And let me tell you, most researchers consider this a conservative number because a lot of researchers think that 1/3 of the population has been selected.
Now, that seems like it's the greatest. Like that's the greatest cover-up.
It is the greatest cover-up.
Yeah, I mean
and
that.
People quiet.
What? That is the greatest cover-up. Now, we're going to cover the exopolitics of abduction later, and you're going to be on next week also. So,
right.
I still want to cover some of the basics. What are the demographics? Because I've heard that it's generally young people. Is that true?
No,
or what are the demographics of people who are abducted?
Well, the easiest way to understand abductions is to know this. ET does not discriminate. They don't care if you're black or white. They don't care what country you come from. All they care about is you're related to somebody that was messed with in the beginning. They only, like Travis Walton was an exception to the rule. He was only a one-time abductee, and it was mainly because he was in the wrong place at the right time, and even he'll tell you that. But in true abductions, they start pre-birth. When your mother is pregnant, they abduct her, They do studies on her. They do studies on the baby. You're abducted from childhood all the way through. When you hit puberty, the abduction changes to a much more aggressive style abduction, all the way to about age 30, and then it changes again. This is common amongst all abductees, and it doesn't matter. We have politicians, we have lawyers, we have scientists, we have doctors, we have school teachers, we have street workers. You name it, we've got them in that thing. So they don't really care where you sit in our society. All they care about is whatever it is that they're looking for, you have. And as long as you have it, somebody asked me one time, you never hear about black contactees. Well, that's not true. Our organization is probably 15 or 18% black contactees. And it goes right along with the demographics of the base population of most countries. Like in the United States, I think the black population is 12 or 13%. And probably if you looked and seen how many contactees we have that are black in the United States, it's going to be in the 11 to 12% range. And they seem to follow suit that way. And they don't care who you work for. I know, I can tell you this, I can't mention names, but I can tell you there's at least 3 very high-up politicians in the United States Congress and Senate that have been abducted. And it's not just them. I mean, you have people all over our country that's been abducted. Now, a lot more of them are coming forward than there used to be, but in all fairness, the average contactee, or the average abductee, I should say, will never know. They will never, ever know they were abducted. Usually the ones that find out there was something out of whack or something out of sort, or maybe they were a military abductee, and the memories started coming back. And for some of us, we have much stronger constitutions than others, so our brains won't allow for the false memories. They kick them out in place of the real memories, or at least try to extract the real memories. So you do get, that's why we say 1% is what's come forward today. 1% of what's reported today of contactees. That's it. So if you extrapolate on that out of 6 billion, it gives you about 1 billion contactees. And if you do the math from when they started, it comes up to about the same. So either way you go, whether you work yourself backwards or you work yourself forward, it's showing about 1/6 of the population is being abducted.
Now, let's get to the abduction experience itself. I've heard that that some of the researchers talk about different stages of a typical abduction: capture, examination, conference, tour, loss of time, return, even what they call theophany, or a profound mystical experience, and then aftermath, that is the abductee coping with the aftermath.
Yeah.
Could you kind of comment on what the structure of the abduction experiences are, and the various components of it?
Well, usually, I'll see if I can do this kind of quick. What you do is it starts out as, like I said, they'll abduct your mother when you're born, and then usually around age 3 or 4, you'll have a contact. A lot of the kids refer to it as their friend, and sometimes they'll say their bug-eyed friend. A lot of them will have like invisible friends that run around. These are actually aliens that are seeing them on a regular basis. And then around puberty is when they really start what we like to call the breeding experiments, the hybrid experiments. Some of the more stressful experiments, some of the more mental experiments happen from about puberty, which is 11, 12, 13, all the way up to about age 28 or 29. Then it changes again. When you get into your 30s, experience changes again. You start, if you can deal with this, by the way. Now, this isn't true for all contactees. Some contactees will never remember this. But for the ones that can deal with it and retain the information, as they broach their 30s, 40s, and 50s, ET becomes a lot more forward with what they're doing. They'll let them retain a lot more information. A lot of times they'll do what we call downloads, where they download direct information into a contactee's head for use at the time or use in the near future, and even in the far future. A lot of times they'll do it. So you have these stages. And then a lot of the contactees, as they move into their 40s and 50s, will become what we refer to as keepers. Keepers are people who work with the alien agenda and help them manage the contactees. When contactees are being brought on board, there'll usually be a keeper. Sometimes, there'll be a gray keeper and a human keeper. And they'll be there to help calm down the human, calm down the children. The keepers work with the children. They work with the contactees. They work with the abductees. It's kind of like having a familiar face or a human face to kind of help, especially the new ones. And especially the children. It helps a lot with the children, and it helps a lot with the newer contactees to see a human face. Someone to hold your hand, someone to talk to you and tell you, look, We're going to put you back. Everything's going to be fine. You'll remember. You won't remember. But these all happen. And then also in the 30s, late 20s and early 30s is when they start testing a lot of psychic abilities. I have never met, and this is, by the way, this is an abduction criteria. If you call my organization and say I'm a contactee, you better be empathic, because if you're not, we're not even going to talk to you. We have never had a true abductee or contactee that is not empathic. They're all empathic. Most of them have some form of telepathy or somewhere along those psychic ranges. Their abilities are much stronger than the average person or the average layman. And a lot of people, and I don't know if this is true or not, but a lot of people seem to think that the psychic abilities were a gift given to us 6,000 or 10,000 years ago, and that's why they stay in these family lines, because that's the family lines where each generation these psychic abilities get a little bit better. And since we do generational cases, ICAR handles about 24 generational cases where we have great-great-grandmother, great-grandmother, grandmother, granddaughter, great-granddaughter, and great-great-granddaughter. So we're crossing 6 generations of contactees. So we can actually test the different levels of psychic abilities from the great-great-grandmother all the way down to the great-great-granddaughter. And you can see the improvement in each generation. It gets a little better, a little bit more defined, and each generation gets a little bit more confident in the way they use them and the way they understand them. It's been a very, very interesting thing to watch progress. And it's not just that. We've also watched other types of things that happen to contactees we can watch through these generational cases, how each individual deals with it, how once it's accepted in a family, it seems to permeate through the family, and the entire family does quite a bit better. They seem to excel. They seem to do better in life in general. They don't seem to have as many problems. It's kind of like, and this is a bad example, but it's like if you're gay and you're coming out the closet. It's the same thing for a contactee. For their whole entire life, they've known something has been going on and something's wrong, but they didn't know what it was. Once they face it and accept it, their life improves immensely. They can go on and lead an everyday normal life, but they're a contactee. So, you see these stages and these different things happen in the contactees as they go along. And then we learned a neat trick, Alfred, about 10 years ago. We learned that we could take a group of contactees. We usually use 50 of them when we do this. We will pre-program 50 contactees with information for specific questions to ask the abductors. Now, what happens is, especially with the Greys, reptilians, and the humans, is what happens is a lot of times when they abduct someone, since it's all telepathic communication, the humans will automatically transmit what's been programmed into their head to transmit. Well, the Greys and the aliens, reptilians and all, a lot of times will answer before they think about it. So you'll get these answers. Now, what's interesting about this, and this is how we know they're correct, is you'll do it with 50 people, and all 50 come back with the same answer. Now, none of these people know each other. There's only a select group of researchers that are handling these groups, or these keepers, and the information is staggering in its correctness. So, because we had asked about a particular color blue that contactees had seen, and nobody knew what it was. And we had actually asked 30 contactees to ask this question: what is this color blue? They all came back with the same answer. It's a blue plasma used for both a food source for the Greys and a fuel source for the Greys spacecraft. It's also self-replicating, or it's either alive or it's self-replicating somehow or another. It reproduces itself. And all of them, all 30 of them came back with the exact same answer. Now, some of these people were in Australia, some were in Japan, some were in Russia, some were in Europe, and the rest were in the United States. None of them knew each other. None of them. And the information that came back was identical. Was absolutely and totally. And from what I understand about the way the mind works, that's impossible. Unless they had heard it somewhere or seen it somewhere, that is impossible for them all to come back and give us identical answers.
Right.
And so we started using that technique about 10 years ago, and we have learned just tons of information since then.
Okay. Could you share some of the information?
Well, give you an example. There was we have 1/3 of our contactees have what we call the Holocaust dream, okay? And we couldn't figure out what it was. It's a very in-depth, very bad dream. So we had actually programmed some of these contactees, I think it was about 40 this time, we had programmed to ask this question. And these were all people who had had a dream prior. We asked them if they would do it. Well, unfortunately, We did get responses, but there was penalties for this because apparently the Greys didn't want us to know at the time what they were doing. So they actually injured some of the contactees and actually kind of did some other nasty things to them. But in the end, they told us that this is a pandemic that someday will be released on our planet, killing 2/3 of the population.
Now, when you say someday will be
they didn't say
released, does that mean that there's an active party releasing this pandemic, or is it something that occurs in nature?
Well, at first, I thought it was a natural thing. Then it was brought to my attention that the contactees of the third that they're talking about are naturally immune to it. See, and this is another reason why a lot of the researchers think that 1/3 of the population are contactees because of information like this. Because the aliens tell us 1/3 of the population will survive. And they also tell us that contactees are immune to this disease. So it makes you think right there that 1/3 of our population is contactees, but we can't prove that. That's why we still say 1/6. But it may be 1/3. But they give great details about these dreams. Like 5 different ladies dreamt about Houston and went into. None of them had even been to Houston and described it street by street by street. We used the Google map to go over it. And outstandingly excellent descriptions of it. They described how the bodies were being removed from the cities, where they were being brought, how they were being burned, what the military was doing, what was left of the military and what they were doing. And these were all identical descriptions. And when you go back and ask them to ask the aliens are telling them this was a pandemic released on your planet. My biggest question was who released it?
Right.
There's a group, they say that the reptilians are the ones that released it. They said they released it, they cut it loose on our planet. And this same group believes that the reptilians are native to Earth, that they're from Earth. And recently there's been some stuff to suggest some evidence, like the map of the Creator, that suggests that they may be right. The reptilians may have lived here in the beginning, left, and are now back. And see, this is a question for you, Alfred. Let me ask you this. If you own some land out in California, let's say you own a really nice piece of land in the San Fernando Valley, and you came down to check on your land and you found some people squatting on your land, you would call the police and have them removed because it's your land. So what happens if an alien race evolved on this planet, left and came back and found another race? Who's entitled to this planet? Is it Oz?
Well, that's an interesting matter of law. One would hope that intelligences would take it to a legal agency rather than releasing a biowarfare pandemic.
That's what I would hope too.
Yeah,
but I'm thinking. See, there's also another thing they talk about there. They talk about the reason that the 2/3 of the population are being taken out is one, the reptilians will get their planet back, and 2, the new colonies can only sustain X amount of humans to start off with. So, maybe they can't take the whole population. And I have heard many reptilian contactees tell me that the reptilians are willing to live with humans. It's the humans that aren't willing to live with the reptilians. I don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, I'd be willing to live with reptilians if they were going to wipe out my planet. I think I could get along with them. I think I could make friends as long as they weren't eating us. I think I could make friends with them. It scares the hell out of me sometimes, Alfred, though, because some of this stuff is really dark. Some of it is not, though. Some of it is actually pretty light.
Okay. Let's hear some of the light stuff.
Okay. Well, most people don't realize it. A lot of people think that the Greys work for the reptilians or the human aliens or one of the other branches. The Greys work for the light beings. The light beings are a very super advanced race of beings. They say they're not even from this galaxy. They originally migrated here from another galaxy. They're pure energy. They call them light beings. They don't need spacecraft to travel in space and time. They can take any shape, form that they want. They're very, very, very advanced. They said they created the Greys as a police force. Just like the UN uses the United States as a police force, well, basically what these guys are doing. They created the Greys to be the police force for the galaxy and to keep the peace, for lack of a better word. And originally the Greys were sent here to oversee what the reptilians and humans were doing on our planet. That's why the Greys were sent here, to keep them from getting into it over this planet. Now, what's light about all of this is the abductees talk about this all the time, this great off-world colony where There's no more physical instrumentation needed. Everything is pretty much done through a psychic means. Like if you want to draw, you think about it, and there's an instrument that will actually draw through your thought. You want a sculpture, there's a thing you can use and just think about it, and it will actually sculpt the rock for you without actually using any physical means whatsoever. They say there's no disease there. They say that humans will live. They talk about the host bodies, which is something I'll tell you about in a minute. But they say what they do is they download the consciousness of the human from here into a new host body and is brought to this new world. And basically, they live about as long as the Greys do. They have about the same intelligence capacity of the Greys. So they're actually creating, for lack of a better word, a utopian colony of humans. So it's looking like you're going to have part of a colony left on Earth, a good chunk of the population wiped out, and another colony taken off-world that will be given the benefits of both the reptilians, the humans, and the Greys. It's a tough one because they got some really good stuff in this, but they got some really bad stuff in this. And is it worth two-thirds of our population so that almost a third of them can live in utopia? I'm not God, so I can't make that call. That's
right. Now, this is pretty even by exopolitical standards. I mean, what the exopolitical community has been talking about so far is generally, what are the governments coming up? What are the governments releasing? Yeah. This is actually looking at potential data, and I'm just going to use that word, just to keep kind of in the
skeptical
scientific realm. No, it's not. It's in the area of hypotheses. Now, if one of our listeners who is not yet apprised of the abduction research wanted to either verify or look at this information, where would they go?
Ooh, they would actually have to join the organization, sign a disclosure agreement, be interviewed by the attorneys, and be accepted by the board of directors. The thing of it is we're very strict on what we will release in this. It's because of abduction criteria that we're so strict. See, I've always had a problem with releasing too much because if I put too much forward, I'll never be able to tell me who's telling the truth and who's not. And with 12,000 comparative cases to go by, we have a good idea of who's telling us the truth and who's not. So if we start releasing everything, then we lose that edge. We lose it. But most of this stuff is in audio files that you can go listen to. There's 20 hours on the UFO Undercover site. I just recently done them. I put 20 hours of this material up for anybody to listen to. It's completely free of charge. And while you're listening to it, there's a place on there where you can contact different directors in the organization to ask questions about what you're hearing, to find out where this information came from, how it was extrapolated, why we came to certain conclusions and certain opinions. We take a much more hands-on approach than most of the organizations. We want you to talk to us.
Now, where would people go on the net to listen to those 20 hours?
ParanormalRadioNetwork.org. We keep a podcast site there, and all you have to do is type in UFO Undercover. When you get to the ParanormalRadioNetwork.org, just type in UFO Undercover, and there's going to be about 60 shows come up. And out of those 60 shows, you'll see it'll say UFO Undercover, guest Joe Montaldo speaking about types of Greys, types of reptilians, alien agendas, military abductions. And then there'll be some other interviews where we've done with specific researchers like Mary Rodwell, Yvonne Smith, Darrell Sims. It's all nice and compressed for anyone. See, because I'm not a very good writer, but I'm a very good speaker. Mm-hmm. So where most people put their stuff by pen or text, I do it by audio.
By audio, right.
Yeah, and it's just easier for me. And I've learned, because of this fast-paced life we live in, it's a lot easier for a lot of other people, because people send me books all the time. I say, can you send me an audio? Can you send me it on a CD? So I can plug it into my car or put it in my Walkman while I'm doing something. Because I really don't have the time to sit and read like I used to. So, I asked for those. And so we've started putting everything in audio where you can find it. Right now, though, they are putting up an audio section on the archive site. And so you will on the archive site, on the iCar site, they're putting up an audio section up there so you can do that. Also, later this year, there's a book coming out. It's a handbook for alien abductions. It'll be released later this year. It has a lot of what we're talking about in it, where it came from, where the sources are, where we got the information from. I think it's slated to be released late in the winter, or early in the winter, I should say, probably in December. And it's a very good book. It deals with stuff that you're not going to hear anywhere else. It deals with other types of investigations and what their conclusions were and where they came from, because of people like David Jacobs, David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, Whitley Strieber, John Mack, gave us a fairly good foundation to start with. And then my 10 years with MUFON gave me another 5,000 cases to put on top of what we're doing. So you take that good fundamental base and you start off with it, because none of them really have gone any further than what they originally said. So you have that base to start off with. You take the research we did with MUFON, the 5,000 cases I did with some of the directors. You add that to it, then you have when iCar started and the 7,500 cases that iCar have added to this database. And it's really put us in a very, very unique position when it comes to understanding alien abductions and why or they may or may not do a particular thing to a particular individual. It's as far as I know, what we're doing right now has never been done in ufology before.
Yeah. Now, just to follow some of the organizational things, David Jacobs, who is the author of The Alien Threat, is the chairman of ICAR. Is that correct?
Chairman of the other ICAR.
Oh, well, tell me about the two ICARs.
This is what happened. I don't know how this happened, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, but we founded ICAR in '98 and put it up on the web and all that good fun stuff. About a year later, I got an email from someone saying that David Jacob has ICAR. What happened is we're the International Community for Alien Research, and he's the International Abduction Research. And they both, the acronyms are ICAR.
I see.
It's two entirely separate organizations. Oh, yeah, David wishes he could get his hands on my information. He'd croak.
I see.
He's not even in the same ballpark as we are.
Oh, okay.
If you took him and Bud and put them together along with every other abduction researcher out there, they might have 500 cases between them. I was talking with Darrell Simmons about this. Darrell's got about 25 cases, 30 cases. David's got about 100 cases. Bud's got about 50 cases.
Yeah.
And, so they might, between all of them, have 200 or 300 cases, maybe. And our first, before we even formed ICAR, we had, 10 times that many cases?
Well, now, just briefly, because we're coming to the end of this very exciting segment, how do David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, I've read David Jacobs' book, feel about some of the hypotheses that you've just been sharing with us in terms of the pandemic, the 1/3, the kind of off-planet colony, the colonization on Earth with about 1/3 of humans after that.
Yeah. Well,
how do they feel about these hypotheses?
I heard David talk about. That's why David wrote The Threat, because he's with us, and the fact that he knows not all the aliens are good, sweet, and peaceful, and there is a threat here. He just hasn't had the type of research we had to really get into the nitty-gritty of what the threat might actually be.
I see.
But he has. Now, Bud's taking a little different approach to it, but I got to give Bud credit, because I got to be honest with you, I think Bud has done a much more fundamental, basic research than David has. I think David has sensationalized his research somewhat and has taken some questionable contactees into his fold.
I see.
Whereas Bud seems to have done a little bit more groundbreaking, a little bit more authentic type work, and he's had a little bit of contactees versus, I've met, and I hate to talk about anybody, but I've met some of David's contactees, and we don't consider them to be they don't meet our criteria.
Right.
So as far as I'm concerned, they're not alien contactees. They're just people who probably have another problem that has been misdiagnosed as an alien abduction.
Well, I'm going to jump in here because we've come to the end of our very exciting 30-minute segment. but we've invited you back for next week, and where we'll pick up the thread more on exopolitics and exopolitics and alien abduction, and maybe some of the deeper theories. But we've been with Joe Montaldo, who is a co-founder, international director, and spokesperson for ICAR, the International Community for Alien Research. You can reach them on the internet at www.icar1.com. That's www.icar1.com. And also, you can go to the is it UFO Paranormal Radio?
.org, yeah. UFO Paranormal Radio. No, actually, just paranormalradionetwork.org.
Yeah, paranormalradionetwork.org to begin listening to some of the 20 hours of basic data that we're going to be examining in the next segment with Joe Montaldo. Joe, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. This is Exopolitics Radio. I'm your host, Alfred Weber. Please stay tuned.
Welcome back. This is Exopolitics Radio. I'm your host, Alfred Weber. Well, I think on reflection, even the most skeptical of listeners out there in the public policy world that is coping in third-dimensional issues of nuclear war, of social justice, of gender equality, all of these very valid concerns may now be able to entertain the possible existence of parallel dimensional civilizations which impinge on our worldly concerns and which place them, shall we say, to use the analogy, another layer of the onion, that is, who place our terrestrial human concerns in yet another context, and in a way that it is vital and imperative to get this new viewpoint and this new data and the both alarming, expanding, amazing, triggering, motivating perspective that it brings out into the mainstream of discourse. This is Exopolitics Radio. I'm your host, Alfred Weber. May you have a wonderful, miracle-filled, and disclosure-sensitive day, week, and life. Thank you.